So, hi Chad, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, could you tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about your career?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the co-founder, president, and CEO of Ridgeline Minerals. We formed the company out of my garage actually in 2018 in Winnemucca, Nevada. My background is I'm a geologist actually by trade. Haven't done too much geology ever since as much as I used to starting the company, but worked in underground production and exploration previously with Premier Gold Mines out of Canada, which is now I-80 Gold Corp. Now I-80. And we actually made about 12 million ounces of discoveries over a 10-year period in Canada and the US. So it was an exciting company to work for and kind of got me excited about working in Nevada. And that's what led to me forming Ridgeline.
Perfect. So, before we start the presentation here, could you just give us an update on what's the current cash position, what's the G&A burn rate per month, and also include land costs, really everything besides variable exploration costs?
You bet. So we have about $2 million cash in the bank. No significant spending ahead of the company right now as we finished our small 100% owned drill programs earlier this year. The Atlas results just came out. We'll talk about those in a bit. And our burn rate is actually quite low. We're actually running the drill program for South 32, and we get a management fee at our Selena project on every 10% management fee. So we're actually in the US office, we're essentially cash flow negative, that's not the right term, cash flow positive right now. So we're barely burning anything at the moment. When we're not work drilling for South 32, our burn rate's around $100,000, $125,000 a month.
So, maybe you could just quickly go through the first slides and then we will talk about Atlas afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe just a little bit of background on the company. Really important to point out, we are a hybrid prospect generator. So what we do is we have partner projects with majors. We also have our own 100% owned projects that are early stage that we pick up, advance through the early stages of exploration. If we make a 100% owned discovery, we will happily advance those projects ourselves. If we feel that it's beneficial to bring on a partner, we usually do so after the first or second drill program at any one of these projects. So what we now have is 5 projects being drilled in 2025. Our US exploration budget this year alone is $11 million, right? Which is pretty considerable for a 20 odd million dollar market cap company. We're seeing more than 70% of our market cap is going in the ground, with $9.5 million of that fully funded by our partners this year. So where we are, we finished drilling at our Big Blue and our Atlas projects, which I'll show you on a map in a second. And we're now moving forward with our Selena, which is South 32 deal, and our Black Ridge and Swift projects, which are partnerships with Nevada Gold Mines. And those are gold projects. So pretty exciting year ahead of us. The majority of our the catalysts for the year are still actually waiting, right? We just started drilling at our 2 most meaningful projects, which is Selena and Swift, which is over a combined budget of roughly over $9.5 million US being spent by South 32 and Nevada Gold Mines. And if you look at this business model, again, I just want to highlight, what we've been able to do is bring in early stage projects in our exploration pipeline. We've done that work, brought in some really key partnerships with major companies. And then we're always trying to work on adding value for our shareholders, right? So a few things that have been new developments for the company include recently spinning out our Eagle prospect into Medasco Capital Corp, which is a tungsten play. That's now been officially changed over to name change over to Spartan Metals. So that's really exciting. That's now free trading, and we're going to start raising some money, or our new partners will start raising money on that. And then what we're focusing on through the remainder of the year is certainly advancing our main partner projects. We're pretty excited to see both Selena and Swift getting drilled, and Black Ridge is also getting a maiden program, which is up here on the North Carlin Trend. So, but what I think we want to talk about first is our Atlas and our Big Blue projects, which are 100% owned exploration plays that we drilled this year. Had some pretty interesting high-grade results come out of Big Blue, and a promising kind of first step drill program at Atlas, which led to up to 2 grams per ton in individual samples and in oxide near surface mineralization. So do you want to look at Atlas first?
Yeah, let's start with Atlas. And maybe first of all, before we start with actually talking about the results, maybe we could talk about what is a Carlin-type deposit, oxide deposit, which
Yeah.
was what you were after, and how does the ore look, what characteristics does it have, and
Yeah.
what you were looking to find at Atlas?
Yeah, you bet. So Carlin-type deposits are not unique to Nevada. They now know that there's in northern Canada, there's Carlin-types. There's some in China and Kazakhstan as well. But what they are is they're very low temperature, finely disseminated gold deposits that typically form in limestone or carbonate host rocks. So unlike an epithermal vein system that you see in like New Zealand or elsewhere in Canada, et cetera, where you get these high grade visible gold in quartz veins. What you get in Carlin type systems is actually far more widespread, gold mineralization that is not visible to the naked eye. So it's why, Carlin type deposits weren't even discovered until the late 1960s in Nevada, because no one had ever understood how to get the gold out of this finely disseminated rock. Nevada gold mines, particularly Barrick and Newmont, kind of pioneered the processing and metallurgy techniques for extracting Carlin type gold from the rocks, and actually made them very economic. And they, when they tend to form, they can be really, really big. Some of the largest deposits in the world are all formed within that section right there, which is the North Carlin Trend. The Atlas project, which got us kind of excited, is you have this main northwest trend to the Carlin Trend here, right? That goes in that yellow line there. And then you can see all these light blue lines. These represent really important structural zones that have been identified by other much smarter geologists over the years that highlight kind of the main structural trends on the Carlin Trend. If you look down to the bottom right, you can actually see that the Emigrant and Dark Star area actually forms in more of a north-south kind of fault zone instead of northwest. And so the Atlas zone, if you look, it's parallel to that, right? You got these two parallel fault zones that are all trending the same way. There's been over 8 million ounces of past production and current reserves in the Emigrant Dark Star trend, yet no one has really ever drilled any holes over at Atlas to try to see, okay, could you find a similar style of Carlin type system? It's the same host rocks as the Rain Emigrant District. It's a main offshoot coming off the main Carlin Trend. As you can see, that blue fault just cuts right up into the North Carlin Trend. So a lot of, at a high level, a lot going for the project, which made it very interesting to us in the first place. Okay, now that's the bigger kind of Carlin framework, the structural framework that got us excited about testing this area in the first place. So this is zooming in on the project itself. We have over 4 straight kilometers of Carlin type oxidation rock chips, high graded gold and rock chips up to 7 grams per ton. Good rock soils anomaly all the way through. And so what we wanted to do with our first 2 holes is we drilled here and here with holes 1 and 2 this spring. And really what we wanted to focus on is they're the right host rocks, a thick section of favorable host rocks that could host a significant oxide deposit. And so we wanted to see something that was at least 50 to 100 meters thick of favorable host rocks. And what we were able to hit, actually, if we look to section AA prime, is we hit over 297 meters of continuous Carlin type alteration, oxidation, low grade mineralization. The whole hole top to bottom was 0.01 gold and 0.4 grams silver, with high arsenic, high antimony, all those Carlin type pathfinder elements that are typically associated with gold deposits. That was highly elevated all the way through. Now, we also hit up to 2 grams per ton oxide gold right here. You can see where it the gold spikes. The right-hand side of the trace there in red is our gold values. Really spikes at the top of that pink unit there. And we actually didn't even get to test this host rock beneath us, right? So this blue unit here, that's also another potential host. And just the angle that the hole was drilled and the dip of the rocks, they were actually dipping steeper than we anticipated. So we thought the rocks were going to be a little bit more kind of bedded like that, kind of flat lying. And due to some faulting, which we believe is right here, you actually have the beds quite a bit more tilted, right? So the angle that we drilled the hole, we ended up actually not fully testing this host rock unit beneath. So really good potential. We know that the system is mineralized throughout. We could come back in, drill some holes that are more oriented, a little more favorable to both of those bedding units, and hopefully we could hit some interesting mineralization. So what we like is we've got up to 2 grams gold. That's critical, right? You need to have a system that can produce multi-gram gold if you're going to have any chance of producing an oxide deposit worth mining, right? On top of that, you also need to have a thick host unit that is near surface. And we found both in this drill program. Would I have loved to have drilled, 150 meters, a half a gram or a gram per ton, that would have been obviously incredible. But for a first pass 2-hole program, this is actually a pretty promising start, and it certainly warrants additional follow-up drilling from our team. So we're excited to see where that goes.
So first of all, the light blue, what host rock is that, and what's the red?
Yeah,
the
so
red
these
is
are
the
both
Permian host
Yeah,
rock.
well, they're both pen perm host rocks, so they're kind of it's a subunit. They kind of get split up depending on the two units there. So they're both part of the pen perm package. It's a mix of debris flows, debris flow conglomerates, calcarenites, mudstones, siltstones, all of them with a very carbonate rich matrix to it, right? So you want to have something that's a reactive host rock. So when those Carlin-type fluids pass through the rock, they actually will, they'll react with those carbonate rocks and actually sulfidize gold out of the fluids that are flowing out from these fault zones, right? So you need to have all of those. You need to have an iron-rich host rock. It needs to have a calcareous component to that so that it's reactive with the fluids. And then you want to have that iron to actually pull the gold out of solution, and that gold will actually bond to that iron-rich component of the rock. So you kind of need all those pieces coming together to form that. And we now know that we have the right host rocks, right? It's just, okay, where we drilled these 2 holes, which if we look back to this map, we drilled these 2 holes in this section here. One of them drilled, hole 1 drilled to the east, hole 2 drilled to the west, right? What we saw is that hole 1 is considerably stronger gold mineralization through the entire breadth of the hole. We believe that the vector is heading this direction, right? And we have some really good host rocks all the way through this section and down through our newly acquired trench claims that are running up to 6 grams per ton in the same host rock. So, did we just drill the first few holes on the northern tip of this system, and we actually need, the vector is telling us, well, maybe we actually need to be drilling back to the south, right? And so, now that we know we have the right rocks and they are mineralized throughout, now it's just a matter of vectoring in on these high grade systems. So it's something that unfortunately doesn't excite the market necessarily at times, right? It's not a flashy, highlight intercept that we can jump out there and say, but at the end of the day, these are how early stage discoveries are made. And sometimes those early stage results, they don't get the market excited, right? It's part of that process of working way through and making sure that you have all the pieces that can form a Carlin-type deposit need to be there. And we've proven that now. The next question is, okay, is it going to take, 6 holes, 8 holes scattered across, this entire land package to figure out where is the core of the system, right? And a big part of, I think, our future plans is we'd love to consolidate these chunks of ground, right? If we can consolidate this ground, it forms one cohesive land package. That's all private ground that's owned by Nevada Gold Mines. We're obviously pretty good partners with these guys. And so there's been discussions about, well, does it make sense to try to throw all of this together and explore it as one cohesive block instead of kind of the patchwork quilt that we've been able to assemble of BLM claims that we've staked ourselves. So I think the main focus for this year, for the rest of the year, is working on that land consolidation, updating our model. We're going to do some additional trenching down in the trench area, the new trench claims. We're going to expose some of this mineralized rock at surface and see if we can see some continuity at surface that we can then chase with a drill. It's I think next year it'd be pretty exciting to come back and try to do at least a 5 to 7 hole drill program to continue vectoring towards what we think will be a pretty interesting discovery.
So first of all, there was 700 meters between hole 1 and 2. Can't be completely ruled out that there isn't something in between, or would you say that would you follow up in between those holes, or is it just to the south that's the obvious?
No, there's definitely warrants follow-up drilling. Like I mentioned on the section AA prime, the next step is to drill this direction from the same drill pad, right? And you could fan out and drill another hole this direction from the same pad as well, right? And see, okay, were we just on the fringes of it and we actually needed to just drill, 200 meters back the other direction, and that would be the core of it, right? Something that's important to really understand is from a scale perspective, these are large blocks of land, and we're talking about systems that typically, are 200 meters wide, right? They tend to be extensive. Like if let's just say this were a gold footprint of an open pit, they can be, a couple kilometers long, but only be 200 or 300. The mineralized zone could be 200 to 300 meters wide, or even less, right? So we're talking about something that can be, this single drill hole that we drilled, for example, you could fit right beneath, AT 2501. If we drilled back to the west, you could fit a significant system just in that blue unit itself, right? So, and that could extend for a kilometer to the north and a kilometer to the south. So yeah, there's definitely more drilling warranted in that northern block, as well as stepping down to the south and seeing what we have down there as well.
So in terms of Atlas, what work would you like to do before drilling again in terms of target generation, especially on your other ground?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to get this trenching done in this area, really do some extensive mapping as well. We also want to better understand this zone right here, because what we're seeing is you actually have a very northeast trend to the system in our northern block, but then there's a great big fault that cuts right through here, and suddenly all of our mineralization and soils anomalies, they suddenly turn to being northwest controlled when we get on the other side of that fault zone. So there's some major structural offset happening that is really offsetting and rotating and twisting this system around. And I think we now know we have the right host rocks, but where are they exposed at surface, and where are they adjacent to a key mineralizing fault zone, right, that's feeding this system? And so we need to figure out what's going on in this portion of the system, right? And I think to do that, we got a map, we're going to trench, we're going to update the geologic model. All the while, I'll be working in the background trying to consolidate additional ground, and that will lead to a more comprehensive drill program at some point in 2026.
What's sort of the minimum size of a drill program that you would like to have to go back and have a good shot at success?
Yeah, I think you'd have to drill at least 5 to 7 drill holes, but honestly, I'd love to drill 10, right? It just really comes down to how excited are we about the prospect after we go through all that work through the second half of this year, and what's the market's appetite for early stage stuff like this, right? So if we can get the ground consolidated, I'd love to do a 10 plus hole program. If we aren't successful in consolidation, then maybe it's more like 5 to 7, right, to test a few of these key ideas and see where it goes.
Perfect. And going back to Atlas, that's probably... Do you have any expectation on when in 2026?
Yeah, I think that I think it's highly dependent on how our drill programs go at both Selena, Swift, and Black Ridge, right? These are all very impactful drill programs for the company. Our partners are spending a lot of money on these projects, and both projects have already had, Swift and Selena especially have had high grade results. So what we're seeing now is, how big could either of these projects be? If those drill programs are successful this year, we're probably going to be pretty focused on both, because we're running the Selena program. We'd be pretty focused on continuing to support that program. And that would likely take precedent over, let's say, a spring drill program at Atlas. But that wouldn't preclude us from potentially doing maybe a summer or a fall campaign there in when we have a slowdown in the Selena drilling.
And finally, how could a deal structure with NGM look like if you want to pick up more ground there?
I'm going to just keep that between myself and the fence post for now, right? We're still in the middle of having those discussions, and I think it's probably best just to keep that under wraps for now. But the deal structures that we do with NGM are very favorable, right? They've been, NGM's been great partners to work with, and we would consider potentially trading a project like Bell Creek, for example, which is a very deep 6,000 foot target that's a postage stamp kind of project that would make sense to consolidate with NGM. And in return, we would try to do some consolidation of that private ground at Atlas in return. So that's kind of the deal that we're kind of looking at right now, and we'll just see where it goes.
So in other words, no large cash payments from Ridgeline side, or large significant share payments.
No, there'll be no share payments at all. Very minimal cash will be required as well. I mean, this is the kind of project where, consolidating ground makes sense if you can do it affordably, but we're certainly not gonna outlay a bunch of cash at this early stage of the project. Until either we make a major discovery or there's a reason to do so. But for now, I think we can do a pretty favorable deal for both parties.
So let's move to Big Blue, and also maybe you can first off summarize what were you looking for at Big Blue, and also what did you intersect, and what have you learned from it?
You bet. So we'll show you go to the Big Blue project here. As we were just talking about Atlas, which is over there and by the yellow Carlin trend, we're now heading over to Big Blue, which is more of a porphyry CRD trend that's pretty well established in Nevada. The original target at Big Blue was going after both a potential porphyry target, which we saw potential here and here for both for porphyries. We had the Delker porphyry target right here, and we have the Ohio target here. We also have high-grade copper skarn at surface that extends all the way along the Delker trend for about 1.5 kilometers. So there's 3 historic mines in that trend, high-grade past production. The idea was, well, can we test beneath these mines along that trend and hit either a porphyry intercept, the porphyry source, or maybe we can hit high-grade skarn or CRD mineralization with a copper-rich component to it underneath these mines. So what we have here is a magnetics map just showing 2 potential porphyry centers here. That's how we interpreted them previously. And what we did is we were just focusing on the Delker trend for this drill program. It was just a small program. Initially, it was a 2-hole, roughly 2,000 meter program. Hole 1 drilled right here and drilled back towards the mine. Hole 2, we drilled out in the valley right here. And hole 3, we actually ended up coming back and we drilled from the other side of the trend this direction, right? So really what we were doing is we were just trying to focus on can we prove where that there's either porphyry or a high-grade feeder system to this thing. And so here's what an IP 3D section looks like under the Delker mine, just to highlight, the 1 hole was here. We had a porphyry hole that looks something like this. And then hole 3 actually came back from the other direction and drilled this way. And so I'll show you now what that updated section looks like with drill holes right here. And what we realized is we thought the original mine and the fault trend was dipping this direction. In reality, it's actually dipping back this direction here. That red dashed line kind of represents the high-grade feeder zone we were able to identify. And we drilled 500 meters beneath that Delker mine, and we hit 0.6 meters of 0.7% copper, almost 3,200 grams per ton silver, and just under 3% tungsten. So a very, very, very high-grade hit within that feeder structure. Unfortunately, it didn't blossom out into something a lot bigger, but it wasn't, a fantastic host rock at those depths. It was kind of a tight pen perm, different than what we see at Atlas, but not a very favorable host rock for forming a CRD. So what gets us excited about this, although we would have loved to have hit a porphyry intercept off to the west in this direction, what we instead hit was we showed that, okay, there's a big plug of granodiorite. And that was what was forming our IP anomaly and suggesting a potential porphyry source. And so it's just a very pyrite and magnetite-rich granodiorite. It's not mineralized, but along the margins of that, you have potential for a high-grade feeder zone that extends down into the same host rocks here that host the Selena CRD deposit. So that's what gets us pretty excited, is now that we know that we're seeing continuous mineralization along this feeder fault, what are we going to see if we test a little bit deeper, drill about 300 meters deeper next time, and come in and drill right into that along where that feeder fault would be? You could get a significant blowout of the system and get a copper-rich and silver-rich CRD discovery right along that trend. So we know that trend is over 1.5 kilometers long at surface. So if we can go in and hit a CRD, a copper-rich CRD at depth, it shows incredible potential for scale, right?
Are you quite confident that there isn't any blowouts out zones if you go up or up dip?
Well, it's certainly worth, as if we can prove, I think, the greater theory of the holes of the bigger CRD concept at depth, it is absolutely worth coming back in and drilling some short, kind of fences, right, to come in and along that trend. And without a doubt, I think you would find some blowout zones, but you're probably only going to see anywhere in the range from what we've seen at surface, like 3 to 5 meters, right, which is still significant if you're getting multi% copper. And I think that it would warrant doing that if you made a big discovery. But if you drill down into these deeper units, into the Gilmet limestone, which is the same host rock as Selena, we're talking about 30 to 50 meter thick intercepts, right? It's very favorable host rock, has really, really good, reactive limestones that really love these kind of hot porphyry fluids coming in and forming these CRDs. So, the real prize, if you're looking for serious tonnage, is testing in a few hundred meters deeper, getting into those favorable host rocks, and then if you're successful, tracking those all the way up and down the trend, which is over 1.5 kilometers long. So pretty significant. I think that you could use MT geophysics, which we used at Selena to identify our target that I'll show you shortly. And I think that would be the next step, is doing a quick MT program to try to image the potential sulfide zone at depth. And if you do have success with that, it would just make your targeting that much more successful.
This is deep and it's quite expensive to drill here. So what's Ridgeline's plan for Big Blue going forward?
Yeah, I think just like Atlas, we are, gonna, happily sit and wait and see how the partner programs go throughout the end of this year. We'd hope that, success from those programs helps warrant further drilling in our own 100% own projects, or helps fund that. But we're pretty excited. I mean, if you actually think about like Selena and what really cracked that project open, it was doing that MT survey with South 32. We now know exactly what to look for, and we know what the signature of that system looks like in the same host rocks. So I think the next step would potentially be an MT survey even as early as this fall, but it's kind of dependent on how the other projects are going. And that would help, I think, advance the project towards a follow-up drill program in 2026. And whether that is funded by partners or by Ridgeline 100%, we still haven't figured out yet. We're kind of open to either scenario in this case because of the high cost of drilling on a project like this. This is the kind of target that kind of would support bringing in a potential partner on if there's interest. Then you look at a project like Atlas, mineralization outcrops the surface. It's very cheap to drill. So that's something that we're willing to kind of hold on to for another drill program and drill ourselves. Big Blue, if I can find a partner that can come in and sees the potential and wants to fund that kind of exploration, we'd absolutely do it.
How many holes do you think you would need to, with a good chance, test this theory?
Yeah, I think that what I'd want to see is, just going back to this plan view map, that hole that hit was roughly hole 3, sits something like that, right? The trend, the mineralization dips under alluvial cover here, south of Scarn Hill. So, you have at least 1.5 kilometers of potential search space within this blue box here. I would probably want to come in and drill, I don't know, you'd probably want to drill upwards of 6 to 10 holes across that trend if you had an MT anomaly that supported, a deeper sulfide target. I think the first pass is you come in and drill probably 3 holes to test that deeper anomaly. And if it's hitting, you'd have, 3 more follow-up holes, 5 more follow-up holes if you're successful. So it wouldn't cost a ton to do. I mean, I think the first pass 3 to 5 hole program would be like $1.5 million, would be pretty affordable. Now that we know which way to drill and the better angles to drill from. So, but yeah, it's definitely warrants a more significant follow-up program.
And how much would an MT survey cost?
I think you could probably do a focused MT survey kind of just in this block right here. Probably, and I think we'd want to be fair, I think we'd probably try to do the whole northern block, including the Ohio target, in our first pass. So I'd say probably $250,000 US.
If you don't strike a joint venture deal, it's still on the table to go and drill Big Blue. It's not a dead target. It's
absolutely an accessible project for us still. And the more and more we're learning about CRDs with our partnership with South 32, we're really getting our head wrapped into these things. And we think it's still a very valid target. And, to hit that kind of grade, right? Like to hit, even if it's narrow, to hit almost 3,200, 3.2 kilograms per ton silver, 0.7 copper, and 2.6% tungsten, especially that tungsten and the copper grades, there's support that there's a porphyry source, right? Is that porphyry source Ohio? Is it somewhere undercover in the valley? Is it to the north? I mean, we still are trying to figure that out, right? But we're close to a porphyry source. Tungsten typically stays very close to porphyry, the core of porphyry systems. It doesn't travel very far. So we feel that we're within a couple kilometers of that porphyry source to be getting those kind of tungsten grades. So we'll see, but I still think there's a lot of potential at Big Blue. And unfortunately, this maiden program didn't quite deliver what the market was looking for. As usual, the expectations are very high. But our team, this has hit that internal hurdle rate for us that it does warrant follow-up drilling, whether funded by partners or 100% by us.
If you would drill Big Blue on your own, how does Big Blue stack up compared to Atlas when competing for capital?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that, Atlas is very attractive from it's low, the cost to test is very low. And, you don't need to find as big of a deposit at Atlas to make it economic, right? You can find 500,000 ounces at Atlas of oxide gold, and that could potentially be a mine for a small producer in Nevada, right? That's kind of the minimum hurdle you want to hit. You have to find a much bigger system to warrant, an underground mine, for example, at Delker, at Big Blue, right? So I think that Atlas ticks the boxes for the cost of the test. Your chance of success is pretty good. We know that we have the right host rocks and we got gold in the system. So yeah, I think we can do a follow up there. it really comes down to market sentiment. Are we having success at our other projects, right? I mean, if Selena hits big, then obviously drilling Big Blue is a little more compelling for us, right? Because we're already on to a major CRD discovery there. So a follow-up program at Big Blue would fit nicely into that strategy. If Swift were to hit big with NGM, then maybe we want to lean into our gold project a little more and see if we can make a discovery there that might pique NGM's interest as well. So it really, it's a bit of a floating target. I can tell you right now, we won't be doing any drilling at either project throughout the remainder of this year, and we'll be seeing how everything stacks up heading into 26 and see which one we want to drill.
Yeah. And maybe you can quickly just summarize Spartan Metals. You sold the Eagle property, which is staked, but had announced to Midas Capital, which now Spartan Metals. At last time I looked, they had a 7.5 million market cap. They just, they're trading on TSXV. They just began trading, and you own 20% of it.
Yeah.
Can you explain? Yeah, talk about that.
For sure, yeah. So just for a little perspective, if you look at the Nevada map on the right-hand side, of the entire state, we're essentially directly between Big Blue and Selena, but right on the eastern edge of the state of Nevada. So the project we were going after initially, we were looking for like a porphyry copper / CRD target at Eagle, and as we did more research, staked more ground, realized that the Eagle district is one of the most prolific tungsten mining districts as far as grade goes in the entire United States. And the historic operators, they only mine down to depths of about 75 meters. So these veins that are full of, Huebnerite, which is a tungsten-bearing oxide metal, those veins extend for 2 kilometers at surface that we've been able to rock chip multi% tungsten in with silver and copper as well. And the mine only focused on the very northern tip, and they only mine down to 75 meters. So we think there's incredible opportunity there for a group like Spartan to come in. We like the management team. We think there's great potential there, but we didn't feel that it was a great fit for Ridgeline to bring on a critical metals play when we already had so many irons in the fire with our partner deals and our own 100% owned projects. We just felt that, introducing a tungsten play into the portfolio would kind of only muddy the water a little bit. So I think it's a great deal. We invested about $150,000 into the, staking and acquisition of this project. And in return, our equity position right out the gate is already worth almost $2 million, right? So pretty exciting for us. We have a top up, right? We'll be receiving additional shares at the end of year 1 to top us back up to 19.9%. So we have a non-dilutive right for the first year. And we also get a 1% NSR on all metals. And, on top of tungsten, there's antimony on the project, multi-percent antimony. There's copper, there's high-grade silver, and there's also a metal called rubidium, which is a very rare critical metal that is actually used in guided missile chips. So very, very strategic for the U.S., and there's no domestic production of either tungsten or rubidium in the United States. So I think the timing's right for a tungsten play, and Ridgeline stands to benefit from the potential share appreciation that we hope to see with Spartan. So we can use it for non-dilutive financings in the future, sell some of our position if it makes sense, and use it to fund our own exploration, right? So I think it's a great deal for the company.
Maybe just quickly before we move to Selena, what's Ridgeline's plan for its shareholding in Spartan Metals?
So we want to be supportive shareholders. We will not be investing any of our own capital into future financings or growth of the company. So our investment in Spartan was strictly acquiring the project and helping kind of incubate getting Spartan up and off the ground. We will continue to dilute down after our 1-year non-dilutive right expires, and we will never. The goal is to never own more than 19.9, and we'd like to keep our position at 9.9. For moving forward as well. So if we were looking to, if Spartan's doing really well, and we're looking to maybe do some non-dilutive stock sale for us, just like Kennerland did with their Lift Power shares maybe 3-4 years ago, we would consider doing so. We'd probably try to keep it at 9.9% moving forward. We have a lot of potential in this project, and we kind of want to be there for the ride.
So let's go to Selena, and maybe you could just give us an update on what Selena is, what you're looking for, how much it will drill, where, and the budget.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so now we're looking at back to this regional map. We were just looking at the Big Blue project, which is on the northern part of this porphyry CRD trend. Now we're going to look down to Selena, which is our partnership with South 32, $20 million deal for 80%. That Ridgeline retains a 20% fully carried interest all the way to commercial production on the back end of the deal. Zooming in on the project itself, you got Freeport-McMoran owns the Butte Valley Porphyry, which is right here. That is the fluid source to our CRD system. So if you think of it this way, if you got your big porphyry, it is pushing fluids out into the surrounding host rocks, and it's creating a silver, lead, zinc, gold, plus or minus copper system at our Selena project, right? So it's just all associated with this big porphyry source. And so if we zoom in a little bit, what we were able to do with when we brought on South 32 as partners is we made this original chinchilla oxide discovery, which is on the right-hand side of the map. This is a outcropping oxide, silver, lead, zinc, and gold system that is potentially open pittable. But what we wanted to do is we did an MT survey, which is these colored lines. And what that was chasing was actually the high-grade sulfide kind of extension of that chinchilla oxide system at surface. So when you think of how a CR or a porphyry system has your copper porphyry here, you want to be about 1 to 2 kilometers away from that porphyry, which would be right in this sweet spot here. That's where, for example, the Taylor deposit, which South 32 also owns in Arizona, that is the exact distance that the Taylor deposit sits away from the Sunnyside porphyry, which is the porphyry source. So when we made our chinchilla oxide discovery here, we all, when we brought in South 32 to look at the project, everyone agreed, okay, this is the distal edges of the bigger system, and we need to go back this way to go after the source. And so what that MT anomaly is showing us is you have this big purple and red rind here that's over 2 kilometers long north-south and over 1 kilometer wide. That is showing a highly conductive anomaly, suggesting that there's a sulfide body at depth. And so when we look at this in section, it'll help make it a little easier. We're going to look along AA prime. And here's what that MT anomaly looks like in 3D. So the reason we got so excited about this project is you can see right here, the chinchilla oxide discovery is over to the right, very subtle MT anomaly. And the reason that's subtle is because that it's been oxidized, right? So it's no longer sulfide. It's not conductive. So when we pump electricity into the surface with this MT survey, it shows a muted response, that chinchilla oxide. But what it also showed is a very strong conductive response. That's not a great color right here, right? Now that conductive anomaly, the MT anomaly, is directly beneath a single drill hole we drilled in 2022, which hit up to 3 meters, a 600-gram silver equivalent. And that hole actually stopped right in the upper section of that zone, right? So didn't fully test it. What we're doing now with South 32 is our hole number 2 is actually collared, and it'll be drilling back like this. It's going to drill all the way down to about 5,500 feet, or roughly 3,500 meters total depth, right? And it's going to fully test all of these thrust faults, which are important structural and fluid conduits for the mineralizing system. We already know that this thrust fault that feeds the chinchilla oxide zone, we know that that is already a mineralizing fault zone. And that cuts right through the core of that MT anomaly, right? So we have a lot of, you could say, as much confidence as you can get in a deep geophysical target. We have a lot of confidence in what this target is showing us, this anomaly is showing us, because it very much ties in with what we already know about the system. The discovery we've made at chinchilla oxide has the same controls, the same host rock that hosts chinchilla oxide. It continues down, and we can potentially make a discovery in those host rocks. And we also know that the host rocks beneath it, which are here and here, those continue down into the core of the anomaly. So these deep targets have never been tested, these rock units, but we have hit sniffs of high-grade mineralization beneath chinchilla oxide through there that show, okay, those host rocks are prospective. And as they project down into our MT target, they could actually be the primary host for this MT anomaly. So I'm really excited to see how this comes together. We're currently drilling hole 1. Now, if we look at a section, go back to this right here. If we look at section BB prime, which is actually down a long section along the length of the MT anomaly, here's what that looks like. So this is showing a very strong anomaly, again, controlled by a well-documented thrust fault that extends through here. And you actually see that anomaly actually kind of wrapping around the margins of that thrust fault, which we think again is another fluid conduit, right? So hole 1 is drilling like this right now. Actually, it's a little more like this. Hole 2 is going to be right about here. Or sorry, hole 2, my mistake, is actually on the other end of the anomaly. We're drilling it right there. Hole 3 will be drilled last, right through the core of the system, right? So all 3 of these holes are testing the MT anomaly at different elevations, different host rocks, all the way down, right? So we're hitting all the way along that thrust fault at different elevations in the system to try and just see, okay, where is the strongest part of this system? What are the controls on mineralization at depth? And based on everything we've seen at Chinchilla Oxide, we know we have a very thick host Ute rock section. We know that we can see multiple zones all the way through over about a 500 meter kind of thick interval. There's potential for multiple stacked zones, and we think that the core of this anomaly in purple is representing a highly conductive sulfide body at depth. So the reason we get excited, again, if we look back to that original cross section, here what I've done is I've actually taken the Taylor deposit and I've overlain it to scale over top of our system. And so I've actually shown, if this were the Sunnyside porphyry, which is analogous to our Butte Valley porphyry right here, the exact same distance away from Sunnyside, you have the major Taylor deposit discovery, which South 32 paid $1.8 billion for in 2018 to acquire from Arizona Mining. They're now spending $3 billion in CapEx to turn that into the largest silver lead zinc mine in the world. So what'll be really exciting is you can fit that same footprint of the Taylor deposit within the footprint of our broader MT anomaly. So just from a scale perspective, we know we got the right host rocks at surface. They're mineralized. We have evidence to suggest that the system continues at depth with previous drilling. And we think that MT anomaly is associated with a conductive body at depth, which is most likely a semi-massive to massive sulfide body, which would be similar in scale and geologic control to what you see at Taylor. So, I mean, you tie it all together, it's a really exciting target. Now we got to deliver, right? So we'll see what results look like. We'll have the first assays coming out in October for hole 1. Hole 2 will be probably mid to late November. And then we'll probably have hole 3 results coming out as late as, kind of right before Christmas or into the first couple weeks of January, depending on how quick the hole gets completed.
So how much money are South to spending here?
3.5 million US. Yeah, so almost roughly 5 million Canadian.
What does success look like if you make a discovery?
Yeah, so I think like when you look at just what the system has been capable of producing in drill results already at Chinchilla Oxide, hole 45 is a great example of something that would be, in my opinion, a very successful drill hole, right? They've got up to we hit up to 32 meters of 307 grams silver equivalent. Now that's primary silver, right? So the average grade in there is roughly 175 grams silver, about 10% lead zinc, and about 0.1 grams per ton gold in that 32 meter intercept. Within that, we hit up to 6 meters of 1,100 grams silver equivalent. And again, that metal distribution is about 480 grams silver, 18% lead zinc and combined, and 0.1 grams gold. So that's a very, very high grade intercept. If we can hit something that falls into that range in the initial 3-hole program, right, that would be incredibly exciting. Because certainly we know the scales there, right? It's over 1.5 kilometers wide. It's 2 kilometers long. If we can start hitting those kind of thicknesses, you can build substantial tonnage. That would be pretty exciting for a group even, as big as South 32, right? Like that would be a globally significant CRD discovery. So that's what we're targeting. But really what we're looking for too is that MT anomaly tracking a sulfide body at depth, right? If we can use that MT anomaly to more effectively target with future drill programs, it makes us that much more efficient. And, it's only 3 holes over a 2-kilometer stretch. So what we want to show now is prove the model, prove that the MT is responding to a sulfide body. And I think that the follow-up drilling would be much more substantial.
How long when are you looking to be finished with your 3 holes, roughly?
Yeah, they're taking quite a while. So, we're looking at easily 6, the deepest hole 2, which is, like I said, like 3,500 meters down. I mean, that could easily take 8 weeks to complete, right? So we'll probably wrap up the program in late November, I think, at this point, if we keep on going at the pace that we're going, maybe mid to late November. And that would be the first 3-hole program. Hopefully we have some success, probably shut down for a few months to kind of potentially gather our thoughts during the coldest part of the winter and then be back at it in early spring.
So for their budget is quite flexible depending on how much success you have. So
Yeah, I
if you make a discovery, there would be a quite substantial follow-up program next year.
That's the beauty of bringing in deep-pocketed partners like that, right? I mean, for a junior, anything, if you make a really significant discovery, obviously you can raise money on it, but, things tend to move slowly, when you're a junior and trying to drill off a project. If a discovery is made here at Selena, South 32 is pretty motivated, and they have over 10 million in minimum expenditures required just to earn an initial 60% of the project, and they'd have to do that within the first 5 years of the deal. So they only have 4 more years to do that. So I think that they would accelerate spending and be pretty aggressive because they want to know, what do we potentially have before you trigger those kind of milestones, right?
Let's move to Swift.
Yeah. So again, going back to our regional map, we're hopping over to the Battle Mountain Eureka Trend now, which hosts considerable resources and reserves here. If we look at the deal we did with Nevada Gold Mines here, it's a $30 million deal. We retain a 25% fully carried interest to commercial production if they fully execute the deal. So again, that's a really important thing with all of our partner deals. We have these fully carried debt facilities all the way to commercial production, which allows us to be meaningful partners in this project without actually having to dilute to fund exploration and development. So pretty good deals. We're excited about them. So now we're going to zoom in on the Cortez district itself. Really important to point out, all of these red outlines here are all owned mines that are owned by Nevada Gold Mines. So you got about 50 million ounces of past production and current reserves within that circle that I just drew out. Kinross has a joint venture with a small junior at the PwC project here, and then you have our Swift project, which is being drilled actively right now by Nevada Gold Mines, and they have a $5 million budget this year, US. So pretty significant. Last year we hit up to 2.7 meters of 7 grams per ton right here, with up to a meter of 10.4. Those are the kind of grades we want to see, but we want to see more like 15, 20, 30 meter thick intercepts instead of 2.5 meters, right? So what they're doing this year now is they're focusing on stepping out. Here's the original intercept right here. We had multiple drill holes that have been drilled in the past all through this zone. We're going to come in, be drilling a long strike and down dip of these drill intercepts and trying to vector in on that high grade core. We're also going to be drilling a hole up in this area right here. This is our Mill Creek target. Again, this is actually kind of the primary mine trend that we originally thought when we acquired the project, right? You have an old mine right here, a gold mine right here, and a really strong soils anomaly all through here. So we're really excited to see that project or target get tested as well. And what that looks like in 3D, when you zoom in, here's that original drill intercept that I've outlined here with the red star. And like we said, what our main goal is there's all these fault zones, right, that are low angle thrust faults that are shuffling and messing up these host rocks. And so what they're doing is they're highly deforming the rocks, folding them. And what we need to do is try to find where those little folds create a structural trap for the gold system. And it's really important to point out these holes, that's a kilometer from here to here, right? So these holes are a long ways apart. The Gold Strike deposit, which is just downtrend, it's only about 200 meters wide and about 400 kilometers long. So you can think that you could fit the entire width of the Gold Strike deposit right there, right? So that's why our team, the NGM group, they're coming in, they're testing down dip of that red star, but they're also testing in and out of this page of this section along strike and trying to see, okay, can we find the right fault structure that is carrying gold where it's adjacent to a favorable host rock? And when we do, that's when you'll get the combination of a 30 to 50 meter thick zone, but maybe you can get the grades that we hit with hole 6 last year. So that's the idea, because we've hit up to 52 meters of 0.4, 44 meters of 0.2. It's same host rocks that host all these mines along trend. So it's just finding where you get that right structural combination of the right host rocks, the right mineralizing structure, and that's when you can really blow this out into a much bigger system. So that's what we hope would be a definition of success for this year's program. Can we hit a much thicker intercept of similar grades to what we hit in hole 6? That'd be very successful.
And so you have one rig here, and it's currently turning?
Yep. Pre-callers are already started in July. We'll have a core rig moving in middle to late August is my understanding, and that they'll probably be drilling all the way to Christmas, or they get chased out by weather. And there is potential to maybe add a second drill rig just to expedite multiple core holes at the same time to ensure that we get these holes completed before Christmas.
When do you think you will have the first assay in hand?
I think that we're going to see assays coming out probably mid to late November for the first holes, and then it'll be all the way through Q1 into Q1 of 2026 as well.
But so Black Ridge, will you drill Black Ridge this year?
Yes, this is the North Carlin Trend, another $10 million deal with NGM. Black Ridge is outlined in yellow right there. And they're going to be drilling a hole right in this kind of corridor. They're hoping to find, it's kind of interesting if you look. We think there's similar potential for a similar structural setting as you see at Leeville to right here, right? So we see kind of a similar structural setting. And so we want to get in, hit the right host rocks. Hopefully there's evidence of a gold system there, and that would allow NGM to do a much bigger program in the future and vector in on hopefully a new discovery. And they're having a lot of success drilling their Fallon discovery, which is right here. It's already over 1 million ounces of 11 grams per ton gold and growing, one of the highest grade resources in Nevada. And that system is wide open along strike towards our project as well. That's about 2 kilometers away. So really good kind of long, it's a bit of a slower burn with this project, right? Exploration's been going a lot slower than Swift and Selena, but there's still incredible potential here. And I kind of view this project as a bit of a sneaker in our portfolio. It's not really getting a lot of attention or excitement from investors, but one good drill hole here is incredibly meaningful for the company, right? I mean, we're talking about the most endowed kind of 100 square kilometer section here anywhere on the planet for gold deposits. So we're in the right jurisdiction. Let's just hope we get a little lucky with the first few holes.
Could you give us an update on the staking and project acquisition front?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of just looking big picture, what is our strategy for the year, right? We're focused on, we have our major partner funded drill programs. We've already completed our Ridgeline 100% programs, seeing some positive results out of both projects. And then the next step is also, filling out that exploration pipeline. So we're always looking at new assets. Whether it be, we always pick up an asset that we think we would explore 100% ourselves, right? If we end up doing a deal down the road with a major, fine, but we will not pick up at a project unless we think there's potential for us to make 100% discovery. We're constantly assessing Carlin-type gold, CRD, and porphyry projects across Nevada. And we have a few that we're looking at right now that are pretty interesting, and we'll see if we move forward with staking later in the year.
So to my final and mandatory question almost, where do you envision Ridgeline Minerals at the end of next year?
Well, I hope we don't exist, ideally, right? Like if the high bar for success here is we make meaningful discoveries at multiple projects with our partners, and we may be in a position to actually monetize those assets and return that capital to shareholders. That's our business strategy, right? I'm not interested in dragging this out for another 5 years and watching our partners take this to feasibility study, right? We want to make a big discovery. We want to stay firmly within the discovery portion of the Lassonde curve, right? Which is where you get that highest torque, can be in the early stages of a discovery. That's where we think the greatest return is for Ridgeline and its shareholders. And if we're successful, I hope we don't exist by the end of next year and you're all very happy shareholders. But, if that's obviously a pretty blue sky outlook on things. Ideally, we have at least one or more discoveries coming together at our partner or our own funded projects, and we're continuing to aggressively advance them and hopefully at a higher share price that allows us to be more aggressive, raise more capital at more favorable terms, and continue advancing these discoveries.